The night of October 23, 1944, dark seas blanketed the Palawan Passage. Through that darkness, a massive fleet was silently advancing eastward. Leading the formation was the heavy cruiser IJN Atago, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy. On Atago's bridge, Admiral Takeo Kurita stood observing the night sea. He was commanding the center force, the most powerful naval force Japan could still muster: 5 battleships, 12 heavy cruisers, and 15 destroyers. Their mission was decisive: break through into Leyte Gulf and annihilate the American landing forces. But Kurita did not know that beneath those dark waters, death was lurking. IJN Atago was launched in 1930 at the Kobe shipyard, the first ship of the Takao-class heavy cruisers. With a standard displacement of 13,400 tons and a length of 203 meters, Atago was designed to become a symbol of Japanese naval power. Atago's main armament consisted of 10 203mm guns divided into 5 turrets, capable of firing 110-kilogram shells to a range of 30 kilometers. But her most fearsome weapon was 8 Type 93 Long Lance torpedo tubes, the longest-range torpedoes in the world at that time, capable of reaching 40 kilometers with warheads weighing over 500 kilograms. From 1932 to 1944, Atago participated in most of Japan's major campaigns. From the Sino-Japanese War, the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Battle of Midway, to the brutal battles at Guadalcanal. This ship was not just a war machine, but home to over 700 veteran sailors, men who had been through fire and knew how to fight. In October 1944, Atago was chosen as Admiral Kurita's flagship, a great honor but also a heavy burden of responsibility in the most dangerous mission. Operation SHOGO was Japan's final effort to stop the American landing in the Philippines. This was a complex plan with 4 forces attacking simultaneously, with Kurita's center force being the strongest. Kurita's fleet assembled the most powerful battleships, the super battleships Yamato and Musashi, each weighing 72,000 tons with 460mm guns, the battleships Nagato, Kongo, and Haruna, along with 10 heavy cruisers including Atago, Maya, Takao, and Chokai. The cruising formation was carefully arranged, Atago leading the right column, Maya on the left, the massive battleships in the center protected by a ring of destroyers. Cruising speed was 18 knots, fast enough to advance quickly, slow enough to maintain formation. But there was one fatal flaw. The fleet had no air support whatsoever. Japanese carriers had been destroyed or depleted of pilots. No reconnaissance aircraft, no fighter protection. They were advancing into American-controlled waters like blind ships. At 00 hours on the 24th, the fleet began passing through the Palawan Passage, a narrow sea corridor between Borneo and the Philippine archipelago. On Atago's bridge, Kurita gazed out at the quiet night sea. Too quiet. Not far away, beneath the surface, 2 hunters were waiting. USS Darter, SS-227, and USS Dace, SS-247, were 2 Gato-class submarines of the U.S. Navy conducting routine patrol duty in the Palawan Passage. The 2 boats were deployed as a wolf pack, a submarine tactic that had proven highly effective in hunting Japanese ships. On the night of October 23rd, at 0016 hours, aboard USS Darter, the radar signal suddenly appeared. The radar operator urgently called, "Captain, multiple large targets detected, bearing 310, range 30,000 yards." Commander David McClintock quickly came to the radar screen. The bright dots appeared clearly. Not 1 or 2, but an entire fleet. McClintock's heart beat faster. This was no ordinary convoy. The speed and formation indicated this was a major combat force. McClintock immediately contacted USS Darter, 10 miles away. Both boats quickly formed a plan: shadow the Japanese fleet through the night, waiting until dawn when visibility would be better to attack. From 0016 to 0500 hours, for nearly 5 hours, the two American submarines silently moved parallel to the Japanese fleet. Darter on the right, Darter on the left, separated by about 1,000 yards. McClintock continuously updated the position and movement of the Japanese fleet via encrypted radio. On the Japanese fleet, no one knew of the presence of the two ghosts beneath the water. Japan's sonar systems were outdated, the lookouts were poorly trained in anti-submarine warfare. More importantly, there were no patrol aircraft to detect submarines from above. As dawn approached, McClintock had chosen his target, the ship leading the right column, a large silhouette with many gun turrets. This was Atago, but he did not know that aboard was the admiral commanding the entire fleet. The hours from midnight to dawn were the most tense period for the sailors aboard USS Darter and Darter. They had to maintain a safe distance, avoiding detection, while simultaneously staying close enough not to lose the target. On Darter, McClintock controlled the boat at periscope depth. Only the periscope and snorkel protruding above the surface. Every movement had to be gentle. One loud noise, one small mistake could alert the entire Japanese fleet. Range 12,000 yards, target speed 18 knots, course 070, the officer reported regularly. McClintock continuously calculated. He needed to reach the perfect attack position before sunrise. The firing angle had to be precise. The distance had to be close enough so the torpedoes wouldn't miss, but far enough to have time to dive after firing. On Darter, Commander Bladen Claggett was performing similar work. The two boats maintained brief radio contact, encrypted, transmitting only the minimum necessary information. Inside the submarines, the air was hot and suffocating. The air conditioning systems worked at full capacity, but the temperature still reached 35 to 40 degrees Celsius. Sweat beaded on the sailors' foreheads, but no one dared complain. They knew they had a golden opportunity, an opportunity that many American submarines dreamed of. 0430 hours, the eastern sky began to lighten. McClintock gave the order. Prepare for action. Load all 6 bow torpedo tubes. The sound of metal contact echoed as sailors performed final checks on the Mark 14 torpedoes. This was the torpedo that had caused much disappointment in the early war years due to high failure rates, but by 1944, most problems had been fixed. 0500 hours, McClintock began maneuvering into attack position. He guided Darter silently across the front of the Japanese fleet's path. The plan was to let the Japanese fleet advance straight into their guns, the most accurate but also most dangerous attack technique. 0515 position was perfect. Darter lay still at periscope depth, bow pointing north, perpendicular to the Japanese fleet's heading. McClintock pressed his eye to the periscope. Through the lens, he could clearly see the massive silhouette of Atago advancing straight toward him. Dawn light struck the ship's side, clearly revealing the distinctive lines of a Takao-class heavy cruiser. Tall pagoda bridge, imposing gun turrets, radar antenna slowly rotating. Range 1,500 yards, 1,200 yards, 1,000 yards. McClintock's heart beat with each count. Too close, torpedoes might not arm. Too far, accuracy decreases. 980 yards, perfect. 0532 hours on the morning of October 24th, 1944. The moment of destiny. Fire! McClintock's command rang out in the silence. Darter's 6 torpedo tubes fired in sequence, exactly 3 seconds apart. The sound of compressed air pushing torpedoes out of tubes resonated 6 times. 6 Mark 14 torpedoes, each weighing 1,500 kilograms with 300-kilogram Torpex warheads, raced toward Atago at 46 knots, nearly 85 kilometers per hour. Running time to target, 62 seconds. McClintock kept his eye glued to the periscope, counting each second. 1, 2, 3. On Atago, everything was still normal. The morning watch had just changed shifts. Some sailors were preparing breakfast. Admiral Kurita stood on the bridge, watching the lightening sky. 59, 60, 61, 0533, 32. The first torpedo struck. A tremendous explosion shook the entire ship. A white column of water shot up 20 meters high on Atago's starboard side, right at the position of engine room number 1. The shockwave spread, shaking the entire 13,400-ton hull. 3 seconds later, the second torpedo exploded, this time at engine room number 2. Another column of water shot up, accompanied by bright red flames. 3 seconds more, the third torpedo slammed into the middle of the hull, near the fire control tower. And the fourth torpedo exploded aft of the engine rooms, tearing open the hull. 4 out of 6 torpedoes had found their mark, an amazing achievement. Through the periscope, McClintock watched the chaotic scene on Atago. Massive columns of water, flames shooting high, black smoke billowing from multiple locations. He muttered to himself, "We've hit a big fish." On Atago, a hellish scene materialized. 4 consecutive explosions within 10 seconds had created massive holes in the starboard side. Seawater rushed in with tremendous pressure. At engine room number 1, the torpedo tore through the 127-millimeter thick hull like paper. The high-pressure seawater stream burst in, sweeping away the engine room. Sailors on duty. Within seconds, the engine room was completely flooded. Cries for help rang out, then fell silent. Engine room number 2 met the same fate. Hot steam from the operating boilers met the cold seawater, creating clouds of scalding steam. Temperatures reached hundreds of degrees. Sailors who didn't drown died from burns. The third explosion damaged the main electrical system. The entire ship was plunged into darkness. Internal communication systems failed. Lights went out. Ventilation fans stopped operating. The fourth explosion created another large hole, accelerating the flooding rate. The immediate consequences were catastrophic. Complete loss of electrical power, loss of speed, engines had stopped, loss of steering capability, large fires in multiple locations, fuel oil spilling into the sea, burning on the water's surface. Communications systems paralyzed. 0535, just 2 minutes after being hit by torpedoes, Atago began listing to starboard at 10 degrees. The listing rate increased rapidly. On the command bridge, Admiral Kurita was nearly thrown off by the explosions. Binoculars fell from his hands, glass shards flew everywhere, alarm bells for flooding and fire rang throughout the ship. But with the electrical system dead, these bells had no meaning.
Emergency maneuvers!
Damage report, Kurita shouted loudly. But without a communications system, no one could answer. Staff officers hurriedly sent people below to check, but the stairways were pitch black. Toxic smoke poured up from below decks. Atago's captain, Captain Araki Tsutao, quickly assessed the situation. With the experience of a veteran naval officer, he knew the ship could not be saved. 4 consecutive explosions at such vital positions in such a short time, no measures could prevent the fate. 0540, just 8 minutes after being attacked, the list had reached 18 degrees. Everything on deck began sliding to starboard. People standing could barely maintain balance. All crew, abandon ship. The final order was given. But abandoning ship under these circumstances was extremely difficult. Without electricity, elevators didn't work. The stairways from lower decks to upper decks were black as ink. Toxic smoke and hot steam filled everywhere. Many sailors were trapped below deck, struggling in darkness to find an escape route. On the main deck, the scene was chaotic. Some sailors tried to lower lifeboats, but the list was too severe, causing boats to jam. Some people jumped straight into the sea. Calls for help, screams, explosions echoed everywhere. Admiral Kurita and his staff officers also had to abandon ship, but the ladder down to the sea was damaged. They had to use rope. Kurita, though already 55 years old, had to climb down the rope himself from a bridge 15 meters high. Upon hitting the water, the situation was even worse. Fuel oil from ruptured tanks spilled into the sea, creating a thick oil layer. Flames from the ship ignited this oil layer. The sea was on fire. People in the water had to struggle swimming through the fire zone to escape. Kurita was lucky to escape the fire zone. He swam in the oily water, trying to stay away from the sinking ship. Around him, hundreds of sailors were also struggling for survival. The destroyer, Kishinami, upon seeing the flagship in distress, immediately changed course to approach for rescue. But the ship had to be careful. There were still American submarines in the area. Kishinami lowered lifeboats, threw life buoys into the water, trying to pick up each person. 0550 hours. Atago listed 30 degrees. Viewed from a distance, the once mighty warship now resembled a giant wounded beast. Black smoke billowed up from multiple locations. Flames still burned fiercely. The starboard side was nearly submerged in water, while the port side was raised high. Seawater continued rushing in through 4 massive holes, thousands of tons per minute. No electrical power to run pumps. No way to stop it. 0554. The list had reached 45 degrees. This was the point of no return. Heavy objects inside the ship, shells, machinery, fuel tanks, began shifting, completely losing balance. The massive gun turrets, each weighing hundreds of tons, now tilted dangerously. The sound of metal straining rang out as the bolts holding them could no longer bear the pressure. 0557. Atago listed 60 degrees. The port side rose nearly perpendicular to the water surface. The red-painted bottom of the ship was clearly visible, the part normally submerged underwater. The remaining sailors still on the ship hurriedly jumped into the sea. But with such a list, the distance from deck to water was tens of meters. Many were injured upon hitting the water. 0558. The bow began to dip. 0559. The list exceeded 70 degrees. The entire ship now lay nearly completely on its side. 0600. The final minute. Atago capsized, bottom facing the sky. For a brief moment, the 203-meter-long ship seemed frozen in the inverted position. Then slowly, the bow dipped down. Seawater poured in through every remaining opening. The last air inside the hull escaped, creating massive bubbles bursting on the water's surface. The entire ship began sliding down, slowly at first, then increasingly faster. 50 meters, 100 meters, 200 meters. In 28 minutes, just 28 minutes from being hit by torpedoes to sinking completely, IJN Atago had ended her 14-year career. On the water's surface, only debris remained. Pieces of wood, life buoys, metal fragments, and oil, a massive oil slick still burning. Hundreds of people still struggled in it. Sinking position, 9 degrees 18 minutes north, 117 degrees 19 minutes east. Palawan Passage, depth 4,200 meters. The wreck sank to the ocean floor, where It would lie in darkness for 71 years until being discovered in 2015. Human casualties, 360 sailors killed. Many died instantly in the explosions. Many were trapped below deck, drowning in darkness. Some burned to death in the sea of fire. 700 survivors were picked up by Kishinami and other destroyers. Among the survivors was Admiral Kurita. He was pulled aboard Kishinami, body soaked in oil, exhausted. But he was still alive, and the battle was not over. While Atago was sinking, another tragedy unfolded nearby. 0554, right as Atago listed 45 degrees, USS Darter, commanded by Commander Claggett, had silently moved into attack position. Target, the heavy cruiser Maya, Atago's sister ship, leading the left column. 0556, Darter fired 6 torpedoes. This time the result was even more devastating. 4 out of 6 torpedoes hit Maya, the same number as Atago, but there was one fatal difference. One of the torpedoes struck the main gun magazine. The horrific explosion shook the entire sea. Hundreds of tons of explosives in the magazine detonated simultaneously. A column of fire shot up hundreds of meters. The shock waves spread, could be felt from ships kilometers away. Maya broke in half immediately. The middle section of the ship disappeared in flames and smoke. The bow and stern sections separated, sinking rapidly. 0606, just 10 minutes after being attacked, Maya vanished beneath the surface. No time to abandon ship, no time for rescue. 336 sailors died with the ship. Only 336 people survived, escaping because they were on the upper deck when the ship exploded. But the tragedy did not stop there. When McClintock on Darter fired 6 torpedoes at Atago, the last 2 torpedoes missed Atago and continued running. One of these 2 torpedoes found a new target, the heavy cruiser Takao, the third ship in the bar, Takao Atago Maya Chokai Quartet. 2 torpedoes struck Takao at the stern. The propeller shafts were heavily damaged. The rudder broke. Takao lost the ability to move. Luckily for Takao, the torpedoes did not strike the vital areas, where the engine rooms and magazines were located. The ship did not sink, but with damaged propeller shafts and rudder, Takao could not continue the campaign. Escorted by 2 destroyers, Takao turned back to Brunei at slow speed. The ship would survive the war, but never return to combat. Results in 15 minutes, USS Darter sank Atago, heavily damaged Takao. USS Darter sank Maya. Japanese Navy lost 2 heavy cruisers, 1 ship heavily damaged, 696 sailors killed cost to America, 12 Mark 14 torpedoes. This was one of the most resounding successes of the American submarine force in World War II. On the deck of the destroyer Kishinami, Admiral Kurita stood trembling, body soaked in oil, looking out to sea. Just 30 minutes. Earlier, he had been on the bridge of his mighty flagship. Now, that ship lay 4,200 meters beneath the ocean floor. His fleet had lost 2 heavy cruisers, 20% of cruiser strength. Lost another ship heavily damaged. More importantly, lost hundreds of veteran sailors, men who could not be replaced. But the heaviest loss was not material, it was psychological. The entire fleet had witnessed 2 massive heavy cruisers, ships once considered invincible, sink in less than 30 minutes. By an invisible enemy, from deep underwater, no way to counterattack. Fear of submarines spread throughout the fleet. Every dark shadow underwater, every unusual wave made the sailors jump. They knew that down there could be many more American submarines lurking. The fleet formation was disrupted, ships scattered, zigzagging, trying to avoid torpedoes. Speed increased to 24 knots, consuming more fuel, but safer. The command system was also chaotic. Loss of the yaw. Flagship meant loss of the main communications system, loss of battle diagrams, loss of important staff officers. Kurita had to transfer to the battleship Yamato to continue commanding, but this took many hours. From 0600 to 1000 hours, for 4 full hours, the Japanese fleet virtually lost centralized command capability. Each unit decided for itself, maneuvered for itself, protected itself. But Admiral Kurita, though exhausted, though shaken, still decided to continue. The mission was still there. American forces were still landing at Leyte. He had to advance. 10:22, Kurita climbed aboard the battleship Yamato. From the towering bridge of the super battleship, he gave the order, "Entire fleet continue advancing toward Leyte Gulf." The fleet reformed and continued the fateful journey, but they did not know that what awaited ahead was far more terrible. Hundreds of American aircraft, continuous attacks, and finally the Battle off Samar, where Japan's massive battleships would be turned back by America's small destroyers. But that is tomorrow's story. Today, October 24th, 1944, on the bottom of the Palawan Passage, IJN Atago had completed her final voyage.